Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff. Today we are doing another in my series of modelling basics and focusing on knife craft. Yes, hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff. As I've said, this is a modelling basics video focused on basic skills and techniques that are required for the modelling hobby. So if you're new or returning, these videos might be handy for you guys. And if, some people have missed tips or tricks on the way, so we might pick up some bits and pieces for people that way. So yes, knife craft, it's a really important skill to get your head round. It's one of the start out basics, knives come in all sorts of shapes and sizes these days, and there's a huge range of different blades that are available, different shapes for different tasks, but we're going to focus on the very basic, which is this one here. So this is actually my X-Acto knife, the small one. This came in a set of 3 when I was 15, and it still works as good today as it did way back in 1985, and I can assure you it's had a lot of usage, as has this one. This is the other one of the 3 X-Actos, and they're just lovely knives. They work really, really well. And the one we're going to focus on is the small one and this particular blade. So what sort of knife you want is a personal thing. Some people like the scalpels. Personally, I don't like the feel of them in the hand. They're too thin. I don't like how the blades attach. I find them fiddly and not easy to pick up. So I prefer these. Some people don't like these because they can roll. Although you can sort that by putting a bit of tape around it with a little bit of matchstick or something to stop it rolling. There's things you can do. Put a rubber band around the end and it won't roll. So there's things you can do, but personally I've never found the need, and I like these. Your number 11 blade, which is what I have in this, is your sort of go-to starting point for a knife blade. What you're looking for is something with a point. This one hasn't got the point anymore, and that sort of angle. You don't want the ones that break away, because they can actually snap under stress and they can cause all sorts of problems. You want a proper craft knife, not a box opening knife. Now this is actually the original knife blade that came with this. You can see it says X-Acto on it. And it says number 11. So when you're buying knife blades, you look out for the number, and you should find it on the blade there, on good quality blades. Now there's a lot of Chinese knockoff around, and they will seem to be okay to start with, but they will blunten quite quickly, and also you'll find that the heel is quite steep. It becomes more difficult to resharpen those, which we'll talk about in another video. Just to give you some basic understanding, these craft knife blades are sharpened in the same way as a razor blade is sharpened, using a wire brush. So you have wire brushes on a roller which put your chamfer on, which is why it looks like it's got lots of ridges. If you looked at it under a microscope, it would have. And basically the wire brush scrapes it to a point. And you'll have a deeper chamfer on a good quality blade as a rule. Okay, so there you go. You can see I have an X-Acto blade in here as well. I like to use my X-Acto blades. They've done well with me over the years. So what is knife craft? Well, it's the way you handle your knife and what you can do with your knife. So we're going to explore all of those basic things, because this is a really, really handy tool and can do all sorts of things that now purpose-made tools do, but before all these purpose-made tools for modelers, we just had knives. In fact, I started out life with a penknife before I bought this. So there's lots of things you can do with that, and I'm going to show you all of those basic tasks you can do with this knife. Now, these days, most modelers use these side cutters or sprue cutters, or they're called up various things for removing parts, and it is the best way of removing parts from a sprue of parts. But before these things were around, a knife or a little razor saw was the common way of doing it. Now, I would urge you to get a set of sprue cutters, and if you've not got those, use a razor saw, but as a last resort you can use a knife. There is a technique to doing it, but I warn you, if you remove your parts with a knife, eventually you'll wear the blade out and it'll need resharpening, and that'll happen a lot quicker if you're cutting through sprue gates. But the way to do it is to get your knife away from the part, because you don't want to damage the part, because you're going to have to apply a bit of pressure, and just rock the knife blade while you're putting a little bit of pressure. So you're not, I see a lot of people sort of pushing the knife, and you shouldn't do that. Firstly, it's not a saw, it's a knife, and secondly, if you're pushing the knife, you're more likely to slip and do yourself a mischief, and obviously keep your fingers away. There you go, and that's how you cut through sprue with a knife. Now, the other thing to say is your knife blade must be maintained as very sharp all the time. I see people swapping out knife blades all the time. You don't need to do that, you just need to resharpen it. You can do that with a whetstone manually. You don't have to have an electric spinning stone or anything. If you have a blunt blade, you are more likely to have an accident, because the blunter the blade, the more pressure you've got to put on to do your cutting action, and that will cause you all sorts of problems in the long run. So most accidents are from not having a sharp blade with a knife. Right, I'm going to remove this French soldier from his sprue, and then we can have a look at some other things we can do with our knife. So, one of the most common things you can do with a knife is scrape. Now, I see people scraping with the blade, and I do sometimes. It all depends on what I'm doing. But more commonly, I use the back of the knife for scraping. And if you think about the dedicated sprue scrapers, they're actually quite thick tools because you're using the corner edge. So my knife blade is a lot thinner than that, so it's not really a problem. Just put that back. So it's one of those jobs that you have to do, especially with older model kits, but you have to do pretty much with any old kit. So you start by using the back of the knife and just taking the seam back till you've got it to the shape that you want. Now, when you've done that, you can use the blade to crispen up sort of edges and do the final bit. So here, which makes it nice and easy. Where you can't get in to use the back, you can use the front very slowly. I do this resting on the mat normally. I'm trying to get this closer to the camera for you. But you can just go in and trim away, because you cannot get in with a sanding stick, so you really need to use your knife for that. And the way to do it is hold it like a pen and just control it in your fingers. Nice gentle movements, not lots of pressure. Don't try and be clever and get it all off in one sweep. It's never going to happen. You're likely to have an accident, and if you slip, you're cutting a line across your part, so you're just creating work for yourself. So lots of gentle passes is the way to go. But you can see even on these really delicate parts, nice and easy. and then we can use the point of the knife to clean up detail like the gaps between the fingers here. Okay, so that is one of the basic things that you can do with a knife, is cleaning up your parts. Now, some parts obviously have flash, so let's find an example of flash. We've got some on this wheel here, so I'm just going to cut the wheel off. So I actually find removing flash is easier with a knife than, say, a sanding stick. And obviously you can do it with something like an emery board. You can go in and sand it down. But if you do that, what you'll find is you push material over the edge and then you've got to clean up. And the best thing to clean up with is, yes, a knife. So with flash, it's exactly the same process. Go from the start edge of your flash if you can, using the back of the knife, and just work your way through. And if it's really steep, you can see I've got quite a thick piece of flash on here. What you can do is cut it into sections. So using your knife, just gently cut down, again straight down. You're not using it as a saw, and that will allow you to just break it down into smaller bits, which will make it easier for the knife while you're cleaning up your part. If you can't get it off with the top of your knife, you can go in and just trim it back and then tidy it up with the back of your knife again. Now you do want to be careful not to misshape your part. You don't want to do any damage, and that's why we do it nice and gently. There we go. And the hole isn't perfectly round, so we can just go in and make that hole round using the very point of the knife. So there you have it. That flash is completely gone. The part's shaped as it should be. That's great. And if you wanted to just go over it with an emery board at the end, just to make sure that it's all nice and level, you can do that. But most of the work was done by the knife. So that's why it's important to develop these skills, have a practice, maybe get a cheap old kit and play around. An old kit's a good way of doing it because you've got all sorts of distortions and flash and stuff that you need to get off, and seam and things. So it'll give you lots and lots of practice. Now obviously, other than using it for parts, you can use your knife for all sorts of other things within modelling. So other than using your knife on your kit parts, you can use it for all sorts of things when you're building dioramas or adding things to your model, scratch building and the like. And when you're scratch building, some of the most common materials you're going to use are these plastic products, such as plastic sheet, tubes of various different diameters, and square section and stuff like that. There's loads and loads of different types of plastic card that can be used for all sorts of tasks. Now I'm going to show you how to use your knife on some of these basic ones, which means, so if you've not got a razor saw, how to go about some of these tasks. So firstly, plastic card. Well, you can cut plastic card very easily. So the rule changes here, whereas when we were cutting with the kit parts, we were sort of keeping the knife in the same place and working through it. This is a lot thinner, so we can afford to use the point of the knife and drag the blade to get the shape we want. Now the trick here is to not try and cut through it all in one. It's to mark it out once and then follow the line, pressing ever so gently so that you don't slip and go out of the line, and make several passes. And then as it gets deeper, you can afford to press a little bit more, apply a little bit more pressure, and eventually you'll see that you start to cut through and you get the shape that you want. There we go. So nice and easy. Again, slow and steady and careful is the way to do it. And then if you want to do straight edges, it's exactly the same process. Just use something like a steel rule to guide your knife. I always think it's better to not start on the edge, but to start off a little bit on your cutting mat and then come onto the part and come off. There we go. Now, the reason why I start on the mat and then drag on and then come off is if you start on the edge, you're more likely to not be square with this. So I'm getting square with my ruler before I get onto the part, so I know that the full length of the part cut is 100% square. So yeah, that's how you cut plastic card. When it comes to cutting rod, it can be more difficult than you think. So it's the same process as we did when cutting the part off the sprue. I'm going to want you to use the heel of the knife rather than the point of the knife. And we're just going to do the same process. We're not really going to use the knife. We're just going to press and seesaw it down. Now it depends on how thick it is, how well you can do that. There you go. But what a lot of people find happens when they cut is that they don't cut it square. And what they'll do, let me get a piece of paper. So a lot of people find that when they come to cut something like this, they put the knife on the top edge, looking down, say there, and they cut down, and rather than cutting in a straight line, they will either cut inwards like that, so that they've got a slight angle, or they'll cut outwards like that, so they've got a slight angle, and they find it difficult to actually cut in a straight line. Well, there's a reason why that happens, and I'm going to explain that to you now and then show you how to stop that from happening. So to get a perfect cut every time, what you want to do is get your part nice and straight. It helps if you've got a grid on a cutting mat so that you know that your knife is straight as well. But the reason why you tend to not cut it in a straight line as you go down is there is a tendency to want to see what you're doing. So what happens is you get your knife lined up, and then your head moves over so you can see it cutting down. And as you move over, your hand actually moves. I'm going to exaggerate it now so you can see. Your hand moves over and your knife blade angle changes, and that's why you cut on a slope. So if you've ever wondered why you can't cut a slice of bread off a loaf in a straight line, that's what you're doing. You're trying to see what you're doing, and as a result your hand goes over with you, because as you look over, your shoulder moves, that moves your arm, that moves your hand, that moves your blade, and you ain't going to get a straight cut. So to make sure that you get a completely straight look, you don't look at what you're doing, you look at the top of your blade. And as you look at the top of that blade, you haven't moved your arm, your hand, the blade or anything. Your eyes are firmly fixed on there, and as you cut down, you will find that you'll get a perfect straight cut. So that's actually a trick I learned as a butcher. So that's something you apply when you're cutting steaks. Now the same thing is going to be true when we're cutting through tubes. You want to be looking on the top of your knife, not trying to look over and see where it's going. It's not going to make any difference to what you're doing anyway. So when it comes to cutting tubes, what we want to do is put the knife where we want it, and then gently, with a slow pressure, roll the tube, and then you'll cut through it like that. See, nice, fresh, clean cut. And that works on larger tubes as well. So you put your knife where you want to trim it, So if I put it there, we want to trim a little bit off because we want to put a drain pipe coming out of a wall or something. And then what I'm doing is I'm rolling it with my hand so that it moves up and down the length of the blade, and I'm just gently pressing with this hand. I'm not moving the knife at all. I'm rolling the tube with my hand, and as you gently press, it's a bit like the same principle of scoring several times the card. The cut gets gradually deeper, and then once you've cut through the top, the side walls are that much thinner. You'll find just like it did then, it goes quickly down, and then to finish it off, we can just do the rocking action that we've done before and press and cut it down. And that's how you cut tube with your knife. You might have to tidy it up, but at least you've cut the length you want. So I always say take off a little bit more than you want, and then you can tidy it up and get it to where you want. So that's it. That's how I use my knife for all sorts of modelling projects. So there you have it, basic knife craft skills, what you can use your knife for. It's a very versatile tool. What I'd say is lots and lots of practice. Find out what you can do with your knife. But learning to use your knife, utilize the back as well as the cutting edge, and learning how to control it, apply measured pressure so that you can do various tasks without damaging your part, takes a bit of practice, but it's absolutely a basic modelling skill you need to learn. And once you've mastered that, you'll find there's loads of tasks that you can do, and you don't need, especially if you're modelling on a budget, you don't need to add loads and loads of tools. So for me, other than glue and paint, this tool, the knife, is the most important tool that you need. And like I say, a number 11 blade or similar is the way to go. Okay, I hope that was useful. Thank you very much for watching. If you found something that was helpful in here and you want to say thank you, you can hit the super thanks button below this video in the text. Thank you very much for watching. And I will see you very soon. You enjoy your modelling. Bye for now.